Of up to a $2 billion investment in tennis by the Saudis now grabbing attention of the tennis world, and concerns that the Saudis will use the investment as leverage for greater control of the sport like LIV Golf.
Real change can be painful, especially for a tennis industry heaped in both tradition and dysfunction. But success isn't the result of spontaneous combustion. You cannot wait for the spark of change to arrive. You have to set yourself on fire and embrace what emerges. What if tennis accepted a proposed takeover from Saudi Arabia and it actually went well? A Saudi takeover of the game of tennis may already be well underway. In February 2024, meetings with Andrea Gaudenzi, the ATP chief executive in Saudi Arabia, culminated in the public investment fund offering more than $1 billion, £790 million, combined to the ATP and WTA. The initiative has particularly been orchestrated by Craig Tilley, chief executive of Tennis Australia. It's a much-needed injection of income. Statistics suggest 80% of the top 1,000 ranked players don't earn enough money annually to cover their expenses. The real problem, though, is that tennis has no singular vision or governance, functioning as a collection of disjointed and disconnected institutions. The sport's governing bodies, the 4 Grand Slam tournaments, the Association of Tennis Professionals, the Women's Tennis Association, and International Tennis Federation, have often been in competition rather than working together to improve the sport. Incentives are few and far between for these bodies to work well together, resulting in a complicated structure and a season bursting at the seams. It hurts everyone long term, but it's the players who bear the brunt of it all. While top tennis athletes earn considerable revenue from sponsorships, prize money distribution remains heavily skewed towards top-tier tournaments and elite players. Tennis can learn a lot from the Saudis' attempted takeover of golf and the oil fire that erupted as a result. So far, it hasn't been a successful gambit from Saudi Arabia. It has channeled billions into the golfing ecosystem to compete with the PGA Tour, luring top players with exorbitant appearance fees and prize money to participate exclusively in their LIV Tour, which features 54 holes, LIV in Roman numerals, versus the traditional 72. Most players and fans haven't been convinced. Without a full, competitive and likeable roster playing LIV, its team element, introduced to revitalize the sport, has instead been one of its downfalls. It's a format that has felt forced and too difficult to follow. The resulting lack of TV coverage doesn't help, nor does the lack of real superstars. None of Woods, Spieth, McIlroy, Thomas and Scheffler could be tempted to make the switch. Maybe most importantly, we fans hate change. We especially hate change that detracts from a competitive feel of the sport. Deep down, we want to see players go through the ringer and earn their crust in the process. When an athlete is paid handsomely just for turning up, it's pretty great news for them and not so good news for those watching. So what should tennis do to avoid a rift that drives players and fans apart? What's the best win-win situation for all parties? The Ultimate Tennis Showdown, created in 2021 by world-renowned coach Patrick Mouratoglou, is one alternative solution that is a drastic departure from the normal rules of tennis. It has a format that more closely resembles a game show than a traditional tennis match. Each game is played over 8-minute quarters, and the first to clinch 3 quarters is the winner. Sudden death quarters, level up points, and bonus cards are all in-game features to add spice and dynamism. There is only one first serve, the net is narrowed, and DJs are prominent throughout. It's certainly a novel experience, but feels like too big a change. As ATP chair Andrea Gaudenzi says, you have to preserve something which is almost sacred, the rules of the game. This is not a video game. This is not a movie. Instead, what is now being pushed by the 4 Grand Slam tournaments, and the more likely change, is the Premier Tour, which would change the face of the sport as we know it. While the proposals for the Premier Tour are not fully developed, proponents want to create a streamlined product to replace the current sprawling 48-week schedule. Reducing things down to 10 large events with 96-player draws for both men and women alongside the 4 majors would leave space for both a year-end final and a team event. But what could all of this actually look like if done right? Keeping the 4 major Grand Slams in Australia, France, the UK and US would be a smart choice, maintaining the tradition and integrity of the sport and creating a less jarring transition to this new format. These slams would be kept as they are now, 2-week tournaments with best of 5-set games. These 4 major slams could sit alongside 6 minor slams, reduced to 1 week with best of 3-set games, so as not to overburden the calendar. Spain, China, UAE, Germany, Italy, Japan would be at the top of our list of potential host nations, with Argentina, India, Canada and Brazil patiently waiting in the wings. This epic season would culminate in a final 2-week tournament featuring the top 20 performers from the 10 slams that year. And all of this would be woven in between the Olympics, the Davis Cup and player holidays, striking the perfect balance between competitiveness and practicality. And what if we went one step further than a season-long system? What if we also added a team element like F1, where brands could buy an entry slot into the World Tour and with it sponsor 2 male and 2 female players to compete? Imagine some of the dynamic partnerships and teams you could build. In its current form, tennis struggles to make people care about tennis consistently. The setup doesn't allow people to follow season-long story arcs between players, to appreciate in full a player's yearly performance, to savor their rivalries, analyze their team dynamics, and celebrate their achievements. A World Tour League would allow much more of this and would replace or sit alongside the ATP point system, which is overdue a rethink. The complicated ATP Tour, which includes 60 events across 30 countries and 4 different levels of tour tournaments, 100, 250, 500 and 1,000, is an overwhelming thing for the casual fan to grapple with. Creating a worldwide league system to simplify the current tour would bring newfound accessibility to the sport. However the points system works, there should be a fairer earning system which better balances top prizes with equitable share for lower-ranked players. The lack of any collective bargaining agreement or revenue-sharing mechanism is again the direct result of a lack of central control, forcing players to negotiate individual sponsorship deals for themselves. The COVID-19 pandemic exacerbated tennis's financial woes, highlighting its over-reliance on live events and the absence of a robust digital presence compared to other sports. An interconnected, season-long competition would help diversify and strengthen revenue streams by improving long-term consistent engagement from fans. Assigning greater meaning to non-major Grand Slam events would be financially huge, driving up sponsorship and prize pools of all associated events that contributed to the season-long table. Defining a clear path of how the pool of non-slam events could get promoted would incentivize immediate competition and structure, strengthening the entire ecosystem in the process. A team element would almost certainly get people talking, allowing fans to think about the team's strategies and tactical elements in new and exciting dimensions. As a result of the additional brand awareness, it would likely bring in significant sponsorship and investment for players and tournaments alike, as different sports brands clamor to secure and sponsor the next tennis superstars. While sponsorship for elite players has meant that 8 of the top 10 highest-earning female athletes in 2022 were tennis stars, team branding would help drive future collaborative, innovative partnerships and opportunities for all. LIV Golf failed to align with existing regulations and governing bodies to ensure legitimacy and transparency, but tennis can learn from this and better navigate regulatory frameworks to avoid conflict. Collaboration to decide how tournaments are organized and how revenue is split is definitely needed, so shareholders and players are both on side and supporting this vocally. It's a difficult balance to win over the ATP, ITF, WTA, Players Association and the fans all in one go, but you should at least try. One obvious idea to get everyone on side would be to invest more in the wider tennis community to make it a more accessible sport. Building free courts and tennis academies in developing and deprived areas and offering free Grand Slam tickets to children and community leaders would help reshape tennis's image to one of inclusivity and break free from stereotypes that it's a sport built for older, more affluent demographics. The biggest priority for any investor, though, would be improving player welfare. While any structural changes to tournaments and point systems should get the blessing from the biggest names in the sport, it also needs to gain support from the wider players' union by safeguarding the health, well-being, development and financial prospects of all players. With that in mind, adding greater financial support for travel and training expenses, as well as payment guarantees during injuries, would be welcomed by all players, so they have the same protection and financial security that athletes in other major sports benefit from as standard. Change is difficult, but in the midst of fire, one finds solace in the promise of rebirth. By embracing rather than resisting change, tennis has an opportunity to rekindle a lost spark. Thanks for watching the latest Into the Mixers video. We truly value your support and feedback. Every 2 weeks we'll be dropping a new video that looks across the business of sport and asks, what if this could be better? If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to our channel to make sure you don't miss our content. See you next time in the Mixer.